So in today's video, we're going to be working on my mower for the $300 race mower budget challenge. This is a Craftsman DLS 3500 in the special edition gold. I believe that's the only difference, at least that I was able to see from this and then the normal one. So I actually picked this up as somewhat of a complete package. It had the engine in it, the rear end, it had the deck. Obviously, we're not going to be using the deck. So that's just a brief overview of this mower in particular. Let me go ahead and show you guys some of the key factors on why I had personally chose this. So let me go ahead and get the camera and let's jump right into that. So like I said, this is actually a DLS 3500, I guess the limited edition in that gold color. Picked this thing up, still has the stock motor in here. Now I did pick it up with a couple issues. First one being the rear end was locked up. Had to drag it up on a trailer, drag it off. Ended up being just a seized brake caliper. Went ahead and fixed that up just so I was at least able to roll it around. Next thing was the wiring on the mower. So it did have an issue where it wasn't starting. It ended up being one of the leads from the actual ignition switch up to the solenoid to actually establish that connection between the battery and starter. So went ahead and got that fixed. While we were in here, we went ahead and just bypassed some of the switches needed to actually crank it over. And then next up was the actual engine. So obviously just out the get-go, this thing wouldn't start up. Went ahead and took the carb off, cleaned the carburetor, went ahead and redid the valve lashing. I know in these Intech engines, there's an issue with the compression release. I'm not too sure if that's specific to this motor or possibly another Intech motor. I believe it might be the 2 cylinders. Went ahead and just double checked that that was working with the valve cover off, and we're a-okay in that department. Again, cleaned the carb for the time being. Just ran a cable straight to the carburetor. When we get to actually lowering this thing, we're gonna go ahead and strip the frame, especially for that rear end there. So the motor's gonna be coming off, whether it likes it or not. Just wanna go ahead and more or less just verify everything's working before I tear it apart. So with an overview of the engine, another thing I went ahead and did was wired up the headlights separate from the engine. Now another reason I had chosen this mower over another body style I was originally looking at was just the sheer size of this floor pan. Now it doesn't look crazy on camera, but for the size of this mower, this floor pan, or at least the leg room that you get as well as the foot room, is honestly very, very large. So that's a plus, more room for pedals and whatnot. I guess as far as the rear end goes, we're working with a 6-speed transmission, obviously with a neutral as well as a reverse. Let's go ahead and fire this thing over, verify that it does start up, as well as move forwards and backwards. So I'm gonna go ahead and set you guys back on the stand while I get this thing fired up. So now that we have verified that our motor does indeed run, I wouldn't say the best, but we do have a tune-up kit coming in for that. And we have verified that at least our first gear, as well as our reverse and neutral, also indeed do work. I think it's time to lower this thing. So what we're gonna end up doing is actually gonna be pulling the engine, and from there we're gonna start on trying to lower the front end. I have an idea of mind what I'm gonna end up doing for the front end, so we'll see if that ends up working out for us. If not, I have another idea that I know for sure would work, so we'll try to do that. So with all of that being said, and with this motor being briefed over and verified as working, let's go ahead and yank that engine. So now that we have the engine off of the frame here, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is lift the front end up. We're gonna go ahead and pop the tires off and try to go ahead and flip these spindles upside down. See if it's possible to reroute these tie rods, kind of see what we're going to do for the steering, remount the wheels up, lower this thing back down, and we'll see where it's sitting if this all works out. So let's go ahead and try to flip these spindles and hopefully see where this thing sits. Now essentially all we did here was just take the spindles and go ahead and flip them. So we're using the same side spindles, just flipped 180 degrees vertically. And then as you can see, this is going to bring the wheel sitting all the way down here, sitting all the way up here. And by the looks of it, we also are going to get some negative camber out of this. Now I have a feeling, by looking at how this is set up right now, this is going to hit the hood way up here. And to go ahead and test that theory out, I actually went ahead and tossed the wheels on. This thing's going to be sitting way too low. Obviously the tire itself is sitting above the frame. So we're going to go ahead and scratch this idea. We're going to do what I had originally planned, which is to ditch the stock spindles. So we're going to go ahead and remove these. And what we're going to run instead of this style of spindle is a rod that goes through the subframe here. And we'll have a clamp, almost like a C, that'll go right through the rod, pivot on the rod, and then off the C on the arm, then we'll have the rod sticking out for our tire to go on. And this will put our wheel on the same plane as the subframe here, obviously making this thing a lot lower. So our wheel would be sitting, give or take, around there. Let me go ahead and mock that up with the camera set up so you guys can see that. And then as you guys can see, it'll be sitting more like this compared to that other side, which is way up on the hood. So it should give this thing a decent ride height. And then obviously when we figure that out, we'll have to figure out how we're actually going to be turning the wheels as far as the steering goes. Okay, so this is a couple days ahead of from when that footage was recorded. And our original plan of just going ahead and flipping the spindles isn't going to work as I had imagined it. What essentially ends up happening, even though it's lowered 3 inches and then cuts across for the wheel, obviously flipping it brings it maybe a foot above where it should be. It just lowers it too much. The tire actually sits above the frame just by doing this setup. So we're gonna go ahead and change the plan. So what I went ahead and did was looking online for some steering knuckles. I went ahead and found a set of Chinese ATV steering knuckles, which I'll put up on the screen right now. Comparing the measurements to the subframe on the mower, it seems like everything should work, just with a little bit of fabrication. It's going to be the steering style that I was kind of planning on working with when actually thinking about lowering this thing here. And what essentially we're doing is we're just putting the tire mount, that shaft, and instead of, you know, either mounting it 3 inches or 2-3 inches below the subframe, or in our case what we tried to do is flip it and set it above to lower, we're going to go ahead and take this, and that's going to mount it level with the subframe. So in theory it'll still lower the mower about 3 inches or so, as well as suspend the mower off the ground a fair decent amount, obviously, compared to what this had us sitting at. And then worst case scenario, if it's still sitting a little too high for my liking, what we'll go ahead and do is actually notch out the frame and remount that subframe just a little higher up, depending on where we want it sitting. Right now we kind of have the front on a halt just until we wait for that knuckle to come in. So actually taking a look at the mower, you can see that the subframe here actually does kilter back and forth. What we will probably go ahead and do, if we do end up going the route of relocating this, is go ahead and actually make this solid to the frame, just so we don't have a bunch of unpredictable front wheel movement coming from this. Kind of go from there for the front. So that's going to be the new game plan for the front. If these ATV spindles do not work, we'll have to weld something up but the ATV spindle should be a set and go type deal. They already got the tie rod mounting spot. We'll have to figure out something for the steering, obviously. Now for the rear, just looking at it, my game plan is just going to be essentially flipping the axle on top of the frame rather than below, so we can get that a little lower in the rear. But obviously we're going to go ahead and pull all of this and kind of see what we're working with more in detail once all of this is off and out of our way. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to set you guys back up on the tripod while I take the whole rear end of this thing apart, and then from there we can kind of see what we're working with more in detail as far as lowering the rear goes. So I don't know why I initially thought that the actual center like steering column piece here was going to be a breeze, and that it was going to be the floorboard that was going to be a pain to remove, but that took way longer than I initially thought. It's all due to the fact that I'm not too sure how to remove the actual steering column. It looks like it actually comes off as one piece with this, but I know there has to be a way where the actual steering shaft or column has to come out separate from all the plastic pieces. But that, apart from the actual wiring harness being connected to, it seems like every square inch of the interior of that, those two just make it very, very tedious to pull this entire thing off. So essentially, I just have the lower shaft unbolted as well as here. Eventually I want to take this completely off, but for the time being, just this tilted forward completely off the floorboard. That allows me to still go ahead and keep trucking at the process of taking this off the mower frame. Just want to let you guys know that this was more tedious than I initially thought. Anyways, let's get back to actually removing the floorboard here. So here we go. Now we actually have the floor pan here and the rear fenders, as well as that steering column, center console piece all removed. So now we're left to a relatively bare frame here. Pretty much the plans now is to obviously go ahead and clean this thing off. This thing is disgusting. But two is kind of assessing what we're going to go ahead and do as far as one, removing what needs to be removed, starting with the deck lever mechanism there. We'll have to take a look at how we're going to go ahead and mount the rear axle to go ahead and get that rear sitting. Obviously we have a general idea of what we're going to do for the front, but we do have to figure something out for the rear as well. And then number three is going to be separating kind of what they have going on here as an all-in-one clutch brake lever. So this actually releases tension on the belt, acting like a clutch, as well as pulls the brake rod, going ahead and applying brakes. So we're going to go ahead and make that two separate systems, one for clutch and one designated as a brake pedal. But I feel like as far as all of that goes, we're going to work on actually lowering it in a separate video whenever I do have the components to lower the front. I want to get this thing all slammed and low in another video. Cannot wait for part 2 of it, as we will be dumping this thing on the floor. It's going to change the look of the mower completely. But with all of that being said, guys, please like, subscribe, so you can stay up to date on this whole entire series across multiple different mowers. There's going to be parts, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of multiple different mowers for this $300 budget mower race. And with all of that out of the way, guys, I will catch you guys in either part 2 of this, part 2 of the Jared's mower, or part 1 of another mower build. I'll go ahead and catch you guys in whichever video comes next. Peace.